Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, an extremely exciting offseason spring practice window for this Michigan program. And as Michigan fans ourselves, we've talked a lot about this program. Obviously, a lot of our conversations have gone to the quarterback position with Bryce Underwood coming in. Yeah, that's by far the biggest storyline for us Michigan fans. That being said, a really sneaky good storyline, and I think really intriguing storyline to talk about is what is this offensive line going to look like in 2025? There are a lot of Michigan fans who've been letting it fly in the comment section. I've seen this conversation on message boards as well. The concern maybe is the right word in terms of what this offensive line is going to be in 2025 for Bryce. Want to get into some reasons to believe that this offensive line can get better going into 2025. Now, on the surface, maybe some Michigan fans are looking at me and saying, well, you lose Josh Pre, probably two of the more consistent offensive linemen from that unit in 2024. You bring in Lawrence Attar. He's coming in the summer. You bring in Brady Norton. Not sure if those transfer portal additions are needle movers. I do think there are some reasons to be optimistic and want to get into this conversation, fired up to do so. Before we do, and as always, the Michigan fans, y'all let it fly in the comment section. I know there's a lot of Michigan fans who have concern. And look, I ain't telling you not to be concerned. It's a huge storyline going into 2025. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Appreciate it. The Michigan fans, y'all been showing the boys a ton of love. And we're going to have a busy next couple of weeks in spring practice on the recruiting trail. Buckle in. Dill, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, here is the fundamental thing that has me optimistic. And it really has nothing to do with the offensive line, Dill. I'm going to start with better quarterback play in a better run game. Now, why can you believe that? It starts with Bryce coming in at quarterback. It starts with Chip Lindsey taking over this offense. This Michigan Tech I was going to say bad. It was non-existent in 2024. I mean, Michigan just didn't attack the deeper third in that passing attack. Now, why does that matter? Because it's hard to run the football when you can't push the ball down the field. I mean, you go back to these Michigan games in 2024, it is loaded boxes. I mean, teams are putting 8, 9 guys in the box, and we know you ain't going to throw it down the field. You don't have wide receivers. You don't have the quarterback play to. So we're going to put 9 guys in the box. We're going to stop the run. And if you can't run the football and you're in third and long seemingly every single drive for Michigan, Dill, that inherently puts a ton of pressure on this Michigan offensive line. And I'm not saying the offensive line was good in 2024 because it really did struggle early. But that being said, they were not helped out in any way because you couldn't run the football. You were in third and longs consistently. If you can clean that up, it's going to take some pressure off this offensive line. And I think you can get better offensive line play because of that in 2025.
And that's just like, can you run an offense? Because you kind of said it. Like, Michigan didn't really have there was nothing they could go to that ever really worked. And like, they try to vary their run schemes up and with some various motions and trying to get the ball.
But does it matter when like everybody knows we're going to run it? So that you can only get so creative with the run game when people know you're running the football. It's hard to run it even if you're being extremely creative.
And that was the issue. So again, you look at like, can you just execute an offense? Like when your quarterback play is what it is, you can't really do anything, and that kind of all trickles down. So that to me is definitely a reason. My probably reason one would be your second reason from what we've discussed, and that's just the continuity of this offensive line.
Can I add one more thing about Bryce though, real quick? Sorry to interrupt. His athleticism. Dill, I mean, look, it's not a coincidence that the offensive line looked better with J.J. McCarthy versus Cade McNamara. You know, it was kind of fundamentally the same offensive line. It was a lot of the pieces that were in 2022 were there in 2023, but it looked like a better unit because J.J. McCarthy could get himself out of trouble. I mean, one of the things that Davis wore, I mean, we struggled at quarterback, but one of the worst parts about it was when things broke down, and Davis Warren could not bail the offensive line out at all. You know, one of the things that I think is most underrated about Bryce is his athleticism and his ability to be a playmaker at the quarterback spot. That's also going to improve some of the negative play and sack numbers that we saw in 2024 as well. But Dill, the number 2 reason, and this matters, is better continuity. I'll let you take it away.
I mean, you pretty much have 3 guys Evan Link, Giovanni El-Hadi, and Greg Crippen, who all kind of by the end of the year, I think started to hum a little bit. And I think all
Yep.
frankly went through their growing pains. Obviously, Crippen kind of won that starting spot later in the year. All three had their moments of not playing particularly well. But again, by the end of the year, I think those three were all playing at a pretty high level, especially Evan Link. He really made some big strides. I thought played really well against Ohio State. Started to show that ability to move guys around. His pass protection will probably still be the thing I think we're all looking for because, again, he didn't
Yep.
really have to do a ton of it. And when we saw it, it wasn't incredible, but we weren't really throwing the ball by the end of the year. So it's like that's probably the one thing you're looking at. But you have three guys. And if you want to throw Andrew Sprague in there, who I
Yeah,
imagine was
you
kind of
could.
sitting around that sixth, seventh guy on that offensive line, I think you feel much better about like I think there's a little bit more clarity about what guys are going to be playing in the spring, so it's
Yep.
not so much shuffling that was going on, especially early in the year, but also just guys who have now been in playing with live bullets, if you will, and guys who I think you're more comfortable with just
Yeah,
being calm and playing
it's
more
the
calm.
biggest thing that was overlooked going into 2024. And you know, us Michigan fans, we kind of sold ourselves on, hey, we have a lot of blue chip talent that's been developing for the last couple of years. And although they haven't played a ton of football, we kind of expect them to be a solid unit in the 2024 year. What we kind of fail to recognize is you lose Zach Zinner, you lose Trevor Keegan, you lose Barnhart, you lose Trente Jones, you lose so many guys that had played multiple years together over the last couple, and it's a brand new offensive line. And Dill, you made a really good point. Like this offensive line was shuffling the deck all of spring practice, all of fall camp. You could tell that this was an offensive line that didn't have a ton of reps together. Having that, you have more pieces of the puzzle for Michigan's offensive line going into 2025, which I think is going to help. And you kind of were hinting at it. Let's not act like Sherrone Moore and this Michigan program haven't been very good at developing offensive linemen. You look at the player that struggled the most. It was Evan Link. Dill, to me at least, you saw this offensive line get better, not only collectively, but individually as well throughout the season. I mean, Evan Link gave up 30 pressures in 2024. That is a very bad number. 9 of them, that's a third. A third of his quarterback pressures came in one game against Texas week 2. And that kind of is burned in our mind. It kind of didn't give us a chance on offense. But Dill, go back to the last 3 games. That's including Alabama. That's including Ohio State. He only gave up 4 quarterback pressures the last 4, and one of them was switching over to the left side of the offensive line in that bowl game against Alabama. I thought Giovanni El-Hadi and Greg Crippen got better as players as well. These players are getting better individually as well as the units having a little bit more continuity, which I think helps as well. And
And
Dill,
then the final thing, when we're talking pass pro and we want to like get back into quarterback play, the inability to just sit in the pocket and be like remotely calm, I thought was a huge issue. And like we talk like where everybody needs to develop. If you just have a more confident quarterback, like because Davis Warren's inclination
that's
was
fair.
always just to back up. And I do think in that Texas game, I felt like in the Indiana game, like there were some games where it's like, well, this pass pro, like I mean, it wasn't good. No one's trying to defend it. And again, it started to feel like it got better, but even just quarterback play being what it was with that instinct to go, it's everything was backwards. I do think that added a lot of like bad numbers, if you will, to an
Yeah.
offensive line that certainly could have used every ounce of
Yeah,
help they
yeah.
could get.
Davis Warren's pocket presence left plenty to be desired. One last thing I'll note: let's not pretend like Evan Link's a 5th-year senior that's capped. Like a lot of times when you're going into your 4th or 5th year, going into 6th year, seeing a lot of 6-year offensive linemen, you know what they are. They're probably not going to make a massive jump from year 5 to year 6. Evan Link was a redshirt freshman, kind of thrusted into duty. I think ideally Michigan probably wanted another year before they had to play him. So he's a young kid that I think he came into Michigan at 285 pounds. Like I think there's some optimism that, hey, a guy like Evan Link can get better as a football player too. Dilly, here's another thing. I mean, you got some new faces coming in. This was not a very deep offensive line last year. Like there weren't a lot of bodies that I think Michigan trusted to play in 2024. That has a lot to do with losing your top 6 from the 2023 season. You got some guys nipping at your heels. And I'm always a believer that competitive depth is going to help a unit in general. Dill, I think the 2 guys that we're most excited about, Nathan Afobe, who I think is going to start at guard in 2025, and we've seen some good things from him in spring. then Dill, how about Jake Guanera too? That's another guy that can push on the inside for starting opportunities too, not to mention Brady Norton getting some buzz as, hey, maybe he's going to make the jump to the Big Ten level a little bit smoother than what we thought a couple of weeks ago. Andrew Babaloa, Ty Haywood, potential freshmen that can push for some opportunities. I think you're a deeper unit, and I think you got some new faces that are going to be pushing this unit in the right direction as well in the 2025 season too.
Again, you look, Michigan hasn't had much turn in terms of what they've been losing to the portal. Like, obviously,
No.
Andrew Gentry decided to move on. I mean, you look, I don't really think he was fixing to be part of the rotation, if you will. Didn't really play particularly great and was kind of getting older. But for the most part, it's not like Michigan's high school recruits are leaving the program, especially in the offensive line room. So now you look, you have guys like Jake and Nathan Afobe and Blake Frazier, even like guys who now, again, you kept most of your top line starters, but you also kept your depth guys. And you like to think some of those guys like make those bigger jumps that you'll see in the year 1, year 2, year 3 kind of moves. So you get that and you get a more competitive room. Again, that's like back to what Michigan was, back to what the offensive line felt like maybe 2 to 3 years ago when you had 7 or 8 guys who all were really fighting for steps.
And I'm fired up about Jake Guanera. Like I think, and you're seeing, and I always say, Dill, in spring practice, it's one thing for the coaches to get up there and give some coach speak, and they'll just name pretty much everybody on the roster and say they're doing a good job. It's another thing when you hear a defensive lineman who has to go up against Jake Guanera consistently in practice, shout him out specifically. And I believe that was Rayshon Benny giving Jake Guanera some love. Keep an eye on Jake Guanera. Dill, look, the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the fellas know my take on Andrew Babaloa was probably needs a year. And that still might be the case. But I'm seeing pictures of him in spring practice. The kid looks like a Big Ten offensive lineman as a true freshman. What happens if he technically kind of takes those steps and maybe can push for some opportunities? Last one, and this is sneaky. It's sneaky, but I think it matters. Coaching staff addition of Juan Castillo. Dill, Grant Newsome's 28 years old, man. Like, he's a young coach that I think is still developing. I think Grant Newsome's going to end up being a very good offensive line coach, but he's young and he's still growing as a coach. What a genius move to bring in a guy like Juan Castillo to be essentially an offensive assistant coach that is going to be working with the offensive line. Dill, Juan Castillo has been coaching NFL offensive lines since before Grant Newsome was born. And so, what a better way to bolster up your coaching staff and bolster up your development than bringing in a guy who's been coaching at a very high level and is thought to be a very good coach for the last couple of years. Big fan of that as well. Look, it's a question, and I don't blame Michigan fans for, asking the question. But I do think there are some reasons to believe that although Michigan did not go into the transfer portal and grab a needle mover, so to speak, that came out a little funky, I do think this offensive line as a unit can be better in 2025. Now, is it going to be good enough? We going to have to wait and see. We're going to find out real quick going on the road to Oklahoma week 2. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.